starting to regret asking questions because I sometimes think I'm the only person who thinks this way, and then makes me feel a little crazy. But do you ever have this thing where if you get really tired and there's not much going on, you're kind of bored, it's late at night, you can't sleep, you're staring up at the ceiling, and then you'll think of like something you did when you were a kid or when you were in high school, and you kind of cover your face with your hands and go, oh, like you'll think of a regret you had or something stupid you said or did decades or is it just me? Am I the only one who does that? Okay, good. I'm going to give you one from Christmas Day, and I actually thought about it. I remember the year. It was 1974, because I got in that year my G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. And if you know toys from that era, the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip was a really good Christmas gift. So we had a tradition when my grandfather was still alive. They lived out just past Kempville. And not a great house. It was a little ramshackle, but we used to go. We'd have Christmas at home, and then around noon we would head out and we'd have Christmas dinner at my grandfather's. Most of the houses in the area, it was very rural, out in the sticks, were poor families. And this one Christmas, the same Christmas, my dad and my grandfather, and I can't remember exactly what they were delivering. I think it was food. They went to a family nearby that were very poor. By very poor, I mean they literally lived in a tar paper shack. There was no siding. It was just the black tar paper on the side. And my dad insisted I come along. And we pull up into this yard, and there's dog. It was kind of scary going because there was dogs in the yard. They were barking at us, and on the end of chains and snapping and making a fuss. So we get out of the car, we go into the house, and it was. I was 7 years old. It was depressing. And I brought my G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip with me because if anything went down, I had him with me to back me up. And there was a bunch of kids. And like I said, very poor. And I remember this one little man, like it was yesterday. I remember this one little boy kind of stood off to the side staring at me. He's my age. And in his hand he had what I think was his big Christmas gift, was a plastic race car. But it was one of those really cheap plastic race cars you get for $1 at a dollar store. Here's the regret I had then, I had for years after, I have now. I had this overwhelming urge to give my G.I. Joe to this kid. Overwhelming urge. Now here's my excuse. My dad was very generous. Obviously, he gave away a lot. Like as far as money and objects went, he would go out of his way to help other people out. But he also had a violent temper. And I had this urge to give my G.I. Joe to this kid. And then immediately I thought my dad is going to lose his mind if I give away this gift. And so I kept it. And I regretted it getting in the car. I regretted it going back to my grandfather's house. I regretted it for days afterwards. I thought about this kid and how I was too afraid to do what I thought was the right thing to do. Because I can guarantee you that G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip would have been the greatest gift that kid ever got in his entire childhood. But I was too scared and I kept it. I still have it in my closet, by the way, all beaten up. We can't be afraid to do the right thing in life. And sometimes that can make us uncomfortable, and sometimes it put us on the firing line. We can't be afraid to give away whatever gifts we've got. That was the lesson I took away from that. And I was bound and determined as I grew up. And I've failed on this, but it's always on my mind that doing the Christian thing is more important than your comfort or your fear. It really is. Because in the end, when we're all lying at home in bed or in the hospital room, The things that you're thinking of aren't the awards you maybe received in your life or the accolades that you got. It'll be the things that you did and didn't do. I guarantee it. Here's the thing too. As Christians, I think we all strive to give gifts to others. Either our time, our attention, our love. But you know what we're not good at, or is a challenge, is receiving gifts. You ever seen the Christian... I'll give you an example every day we all relate to, right? You pull up to a stop street, same time as the person across from you, and you go, come on, go ahead. And they go, you go ahead. And you go, you go ahead. And then they go, dude, go. And you're like, don't point at me, you go. I told you to. And then you have this competition and who's going to be the better person. And then nobody's the better person in the end. And as Christians, we won't receive, but we want to give. But being in a community, we have to become adept at both. And not to be afraid to accept help. Not to be afraid to be the person that other people are trying to help. Because I know, especially the demographic sitting here, you're all raised to be independent. And you stand on your own 2 feet and to do for yourself. Don't have other people help you. But to be a Christian means you got to go back and forth. Why is that important to learn amongst ourselves? Because we have to accept God's gifts to us. Colossians here is perfect. The imagery that Paul uses is of putting on garments. I used to, another Christmas story, true. You can ask my mom after the service. In fact, I encourage you to. If I suspected that one of the gifts under the tree was clothes, I would hide that gift under the couch or under a bed somewhere. They'd have to go looking for them because I didn't want to have the burden of pretending that I was happy to receive new pants or a new shirt. As a kid, I would have been happy to paint myself blue like a picked warrior and go screaming out into the street with nothing on. I didn't care what I wore as a kid, so I didn't like the clothing. As an adult, of course, that's changed, but we have to be grateful for everything that we get. And Paul here says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. All of these virtues, very few of us are born with those. Children are feral animals. You might think that's harsh. Any of you teachers or used to teach? Animals. Look at kids interacting outside of Lord of the Flies. Outside of adult supervision in the playground, it's the strong rule the weak. God forbid you have any physical thing that marks you out, because they will just grab onto that and hammer you with it all the time. All of these things listed: compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. As we become adults, we strive into these things and we try to practice them as adults, but they are gifts from God that we have to be willing to receive before we give these things back into the world. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And here's where the wording is important. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Why let the peace of Christ? Because it's something you can refuse. It's a gift that you can push away. You ever had the angry conversations in your head? You know, you'll go away from an interaction with somebody, and then you'll practice in the car what you should have said. And then maybe even if you're a crazy person like myself, you'll actually be talking to yourself. Well, you should have said this, you should have said that. You'll have these imaginary... probably this is just me. But you'll have imaginary angry conversations about... Or you'll tell somebody else, and like I said last week, right? Have you ever noticed when you're relating an interaction, you're the reasonable one, and everyone else has a crazy voice? Have you noticed that, right? And I said to him, like, you know, why would you take my parking spot? And he said, oh, take whatever parking spot I want. And then I said back, and I'm thinking, well, it's rarely that, is it? You're the completely reasonable person. The other people in your life are the crazy ones. But here we have to let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts and let the Word of God dwell in us richly. So Jesus, when he goes and they find him in the temple after 3 days, and you can imagine how frantic the parents were after 3 days. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them, and asking them questions. Christ himself set the example of we receive first the gifts of God, and then we put those things back into the world, having clothed ourselves in Jesus Christ, and then showing Jesus to the world, hopefully through our actions and ourselves. And it's okay that we fall down. It's the striving that's most important. Christ himself started first by listening and asking questions and then acting in the world, and we should do likewise. But it always requires a back and forth of receiving and giving, and those two things have to live in us constantly, because otherwise it just doesn't work.